Sanghang Gunutarang Upachayang Namasami. When I was 15 years old, together with a group of friends, mostly older than me, some quite older, we rented a minibus and drove from eastern England to Morocco. Spent a week or two driving around in Morocco. And it was a wonderful experience for me, but the greatest value was being able to return to England and see it with fresh eyes, things that taken for granted from childhood seem to be like the default mode for the human race, and realizing that a lot of what I thought was common sense or the way that human beings lived were just the way that a group of people on a small island off the northwest coast of European landmass lived. And sense of separation and alienation, and things that other people go to England and notice, and you don't notice when you're living there, and like how often English people say thank you. So I mentioned earlier this afternoon, like it's the English mantra. Tibetans, they have prayer wheels and they go Mani Padme Hum, and English people walk around saying thank you, thank you, thank you all the time. So there's seeing the kind of idiosyncrasies of the culture that you grew up is one of the great values of going somewhere else. And the idea of going on a journey and returning and learning from the experiences and comparing them and evaluating the things you take for granted is one of the obvious values of a retreat like this one. And when we look on, very common to look on spiritual life, spiritual cultivation as using journeying metaphors, then the experience of samadhi, cultivation of samadhi, has a very important role to play. And I think when we look into this, it helps us to see how the categorization of meditation practices into samatha and vipassana is not so clear-cut as we might have been led to believe. When we practice meditation and we experience some level of mindfulness and clarity, stability of mind, experience some samadhi, it's very pleasant. So the pleasure, the bliss, or even rapture that arises is not the goal of Buddhist meditation, but it has an important role to play. Because it gives us a perspective a new perspective on the sensual world and essential enjoyments, topic of which I spoke on quite extensively last night. So when you travel into the world, the inner world, and you begin to look at the phenomena of feelings and perceptions and thoughts and emotions in a new way, and you begin to see for yourself that joy and bliss and rapture arise naturally to the degree to which you put down greed and attachment. It's not that you have to seek out peace of mind, because nobody knows what that is unless you've experienced it. It's just a word. But what everyone can know from the first day of meditation practice is what is not peace, what is not bliss, what is not rapture. So that's where we start from. We start from where we are. And we learn how to protect the mind from the unwholesome. We learn skills in abandoning the unwholesome. And contentment and clarity and peace is uncovered. We realize we've been covering it up. We chip away and we reveal it. And the experience of the bliss of the temporary, even the temporary absence of defilement is a wonderful teacher, because it brings into question all of our values and all of our ideas about following our dreams and finding happiness in this worldly pursuit and that worldly success. And we realize that something far more profound is right here. So it's in some ways it's a truism, it's a cliche, because we've all heard this from childhood, I'm sure. True happiness lies within. And yeah, we take it with a pinch of salt. We kind of agree, that seems a nice idea, but maybe a little bit naive, maybe kind of wishful thinking. Be nice if it was true, but we wouldn't want to really stake our life on it. But then when you do that, the work, and well, yes, that is true. So in many ways in spiritual life, we're rediscovering, we're coming to this, oh yeah, I heard that when I was a kid, or I heard that years ago, and it never really made sense. So it's like suddenly things that we never really able to digest and never really be able to fully comprehend or appreciate. And suddenly, oh yeah. And it's not often like a wow kind of experience. It's, well, that's just so obvious. Why didn't I see that before? Why have all the times I've been told that, has it never penetrated into my heart? So there's a sense of readiness, isn't there? The causes and conditions have to be right. But when they are, there's no going back. And when you meditate, your capacity for lying to yourself disappears to a great degree. And the addictions and the pleasures that form such a major part of your life now seem rather kind of paltry and insignificant. So it's not to say that having developed samadhi practice, that you suddenly become literally a monk or a nun, or become just like a monk or a nun and turn your back on all sensual pleasures, but you now have a much more mature relationship to them. And they're not the be-all and the end-all. You don't put all your eggs in that sensual basket. And things that seem so kind of solid and real now become rather fragile and insubstantial. And things that have formerly seemed fragile, insubstantial, and now become clear and bright and reliable refuges within. So if we look at this movement, whereby we go on a voyage and we look into the mind and it's not what we thought, and we see that if we apply effort, then there are results that come from that effort. And if we're consistent, the mind achieves a certain amount of clarity and calm and brightness and happiness. And suddenly we see why the word Buddha means the awakened one. If you look at our life, we've sort of been half asleep or in some kind of a dream state, and believing rather gullibly, all the propaganda that we've been fed about where happiness lies, the idea of happiness as being the result of consumption and experience starts to fade away. So looking at this, we say, through an experience of calm, let's give that label, that samatha label, then as a result of that, coming afresh to the familiar world, the so-called real world, and experiencing like a reordering of priorities and a sense of what's worthwhile, what's not worthwhile, what's substantial, what's insubstantial. So many changes take place, and we become wiser, in a word. So samatha is not, like a dead end, or it's not, it's not completely separate from the cultivation of wisdom. It's part of it. And the extent to which it leads to radical changes in our life, transformation even, is this right view and this attitude of we're learners, we're interested, we don't know. We're willing to accept, we don't know, what is this body, what is this mind? In the Chinese, Japanese, Korean Zen tradition, then there is the koan practice, where you have a word or a concept or something that frustrates the thinking mind, and you just push and frustrate the mind until it kind of explodes. That's what my understanding, or it breaks through some kind of membrane of ignorance. But we have koan in Theravada Buddhism also. And that koan is the word dukkha. Only an arahant understands what that word means. Only an enlightened person can really understand the full depth and profundity of that word. So in studying the Four Noble Truths, there's something to bear in mind. We don't really know what that word is, and we're practicing, we're learning in order to understand dukkha, because the moment that you comprehend dukkha, you perform the duty towards the first noble truth, comprehension. There is the abandonment of the cause, the cessation of dukkha, and the culmination of the path of practice. So the Four Noble Truths become as one with the full comprehension of the word dukkha. So we don't really know what dukkha means, and that's important to remember. So dukkha in the three characteristics has one meaning. Dukkha in the Four Noble Truths has another meaning, not the same. And dukkha as a characteristic of existence applies to all phenomena. This microphone is dukkha. It's not, obviously, it doesn't have a consciousness. It's not suffering, but it's a characteristic of dukkha. It's very difficult to explain, or even to point the finger at the moon. But perhaps we can say that impermanence means that everything changes. Dukkha means that everything cannot not change. And anatta means that everything cannot not change, means that it's not self. So in the texts, in the Pali, talking about dukkha is the sense of oppression. Every phenomena is being oppressed by its inability to stay still, inability to maintain any particular state. So it's a way of looking at impermanence and the implications of impermanence. And as you go into the implications of impermanence even further, then you understand not self. Not self, what does that mean? Again, it's really difficult one, isn't it? And before we can understand not self, we have to understand what the Buddha understood by atta, because he's refuting something. So anatta is not a state you realize. Anatta is pointing to a misunderstanding, a misperception of the five khandhas. And the concept of atta, of self, is bound up with power and ownership. This is why when Ajahn Chah would talk about this, he would very simply say, well, if your body was you, if it really belonged to you, you could tell it, don't get old, don't get sick, don't die. And we can apply this same kind of analysis. You have a feeling. If feeling was really who you are, or feeling really belonged to you, then you could say, oh, unpleasant feeling, go away. I prefer a pleasant feeling right now. Can't do it. We don't have that kind of power. So identification with thinking It's very common these days, obviously amongst educated people. But to what degree are we the owners of our thoughts? So can you forecast with any confidence what you'll be thinking about in an hour's time? I would say no. What about half an hour or 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 1 minute? What about your next thought? What is your next thought going to be? Can you be sure? Just recently a number of people I know or relatives of people I know have died suddenly. And this idea of sudden death. But when I was considering this, that life is sudden, everything is sudden. What is not sudden? Even gradual things are just a procession of sudden phenomena. Suddenly you think something, even a decision. So you would think that would be like a mental phenomena over which you have most ownership. Yes, I make a decision. But when you look really closely, a decision happens hardly any different from a sneeze. Everything happens. We have these very nice idioms in English, and I express this rather well. We say, "It occurred to me." That's very Buddhist, I think. It occurred to me, or it dawned upon me. Things dawn upon us. Things occur to us. Things arise. Where do they come from? Why did that particular thought pop into our minds now? Where does that come from? Have you ever had to sort of, in meditation retreat, suddenly some kind of thought comes, where on earth does that come from? And then looking back on childhood, and you find you've forgotten all kinds of important things and remembered the most trivial things, like the silly songs from advertisements and watched on TV, stuff like that. Why on earth does that stay in? More important things gone forever. There's no ownership. There's a stream of causes and conditions, and so complex that we can't know even more than a small portion of it. But what we do know is when we identify with it, we suffer immediately. So investigating thought, and in meditation, again, we're not, even on this more focused investigation of three characteristics, but simply these gaps between thought, these periods of mindfulness, in which if there is thought, it's like far away, like a police siren in a neighboring village. It's there, but it's not. And we realize we can function, fully alive, without any thought in the mind. Western tradition is like Descartes, I think, therefore I am. That's how important thinking is. But in Buddhism we say, I'm not thinking, and here I am. Yeah. What do you say to that? So experiencing non-thinking, non-confused awareness, that's a revolution, in your whole endless wandering through samsara. This is a significant, even if it's for a short period, because you don't have to be something, and actually it's a hassle being something. These days, there's so much importance placed on being unique, being different from everybody else, and somehow your value as a human being lies in the areas in which you're different from somebody else. But of course, really, we can say we're all unique, but I would say we're all unique just as QR codes are all unique. It's not significant. And seeing the ways in which we are not unique is far more healthy and uplifting. So we don't have to assert ourselves to have any value. In the teaching on the 4 kinds of attachment, the Buddha doesn't talk about attachment to self or attachment to ego or anything like that. The Buddha talks about attuvadupatthana, and that's the vada, attavada. So when the Buddha is saying this atta, this independent, self-existent entity that stands behind experience, is nowhere to be found, then we can't attach to it then, if it's nowhere to be found. So what is the attachment? And here the word vada, it's the same as the word vada that appears in Theravada, for instance. I think in this context we could translate as concept. So we attach to a concept of self. We attach to an idea of self. And that idea of self is the world. So religions are quarrel about how old the world is and who created the world and how old it is, and you have the creationists, and then they rebranded creationism and called it intelligent design, and is the word 5,000 years old or 10,000 or how many thousand. But as Buddhists, we say it happens right now. This is not a historical phenomena. The moment the sense of self arises, the attachment to an idea of self arises through grasping onto phenomena, the world arises together. The self and the world arise together. So the cessation of the attachment to the idea and the concept of self is the cessation of the world. So the Ajahn Chah's saying, he would, it's one of his kind of catchphrases, Aram Kalok, the world is the aramana, the world is the mental object. The mental object is the world. If you are deluded by the mental object, you are deluded by the world. So he'd sort of riff on this quite for some time. So many people come to Buddhism and after a while they say, I don't want to be born anymore. I'm practicing so I don't have to be born anymore. And you say, well, what does that mean? And you say, I'm just fed up. Can't take it anymore. I don't want to be born anymore. Well, that's not That's not nibbida, which leads to liberation. Again, in a quote, well-known quote, favorite one from Ajahn Chah, he said there's two kinds of boredom, or there's the boredom of the monkey. Like the monkey is bored, nothing stimulating enough right now, nothing satisfying. So this is the boredom of the monkey, and then there's the boredom of being a monkey, just fed up being a monkey. So nibbida is when you're fed up being a monkey, it's not your monkey mind is fed up. So looking again and again at how we create self, we create the world, create the universe moment by moment, and rebirth is not something after death. Well, it is, of course, but if we don't want to be reborn again, then our focus should be, how can I stop being reborn so many times this morning, or so many times this afternoon, or so many times tonight? Because every time there is this grasping on to phenomena, and the proud self, and the sad self, and the angry self, and the confident self, and the unconfident. These are our creations. This is the arising of the world, the arising of the self, and the arising of the world. And it's something we do. It's not something that's happening to us. And as we progress in Dhamma, then we're willing to take more and more responsibility. Our language fools us. We very often assume that the conventions of language, grammar, reflects the way things are. And there's no reason why it should. And I think I've mentioned before, the very first Dhamma book I ever read had one of the very best teachings on this topic. The author said, look at the phrase, "it is raining," okay? And then answer the question, what does the word "it" refer to in that sentence? So in an English sentence, you have to have a subject and a verb and an object. So the subject here is "it," and the verb is raining. It is raining. But what is the "it" which is raining? I can't answer it, because it's a convention of language. But in nature, it's just rain falling. And talking about ourselves, we have this all-purpose word "I." We say, I'm tired, I'm happy, I remember, or more likely, I don't remember, I think, I feel, this. And because we have this constant nominative I, the one who, then the common sense, big mistake, common sense usually, is to assume that the word I refers to something that exists in nature. And the Buddha says, okay, find it. Where is this? So we look at, oh no, what we're really talking about is the body. Or we say, I feel happy. What we mean is happiness occurs. Happiness dawns upon us. Or I remember, I don't remember. This is perception. I think, I'm anxious, I'm excited, I'm bored. This is excitement occurs. boredom occurs. They dawn upon us, and then they pass away. So we don't have to get rid of the I. The I is not a problem. It's a label that we use to make sense of experience and for ease in communication, and don't want to throw it out. The Buddha never threw it out. But to see convention as convention. And again, Ajahn Chah, Luang Por Chah would say it's in seeing convention as convention that you are free of convention. So flouting convention and rebelling against convention, you're as much a prisoner of it as to slavishly follow it. But it's in seeing conventions as conventions and knowing the right time and place to use conventions and the right time and place to put them down. This is the way of wisdom. So we're using mindfulness to stabilize, clarify the mind, and we become open. We become learners. We are ready to be impressed by the nature of things. As the internal chatter and confusion fades out, impermanence becomes clearer and clearer. It's there all the time. But because we're so caught up in our little soap operas and obsessions and interests, and that we can't see the forest for the trees, we can't see what's right in front of us all the time. Because we're so caught up in the content of experience, we miss the process. So the content is so varied, infinitely varied. But the process is extremely simple. Whatever the content, whether it's sublime and wonderful or coarse and ugly, it's something that arises and passes away. Anya Kondanya says this was his insight. Whatever is of the nature to arise, is of the nature to cease. It seems almost incomprehensible that such a straightforward insight, one that you would think that actually you know already, could be such a powerful key and can completely transform our lives. So in our practice, it's not striving to get this and get that and realize this and realize that. It's trying to simplify, clarify, open ourselves to the truth of things as already, always the way things are. The Buddha said, whether or not a Tathagata is born in this world, all phenomena are in Chang Dukkang Anatta. The Buddha discovered the truth. He said it's like a city, an old ancient city. It's all grown over and hidden from view. And the Buddha chopped his way through the jungle and uncovered the hidden city and revealed it to all of us. It's not something that he created himself. Buddhist teachings here, we're not talking about philosophy and theory, but the Buddha is trying to put words to things that are profound and subtle, and that's the great genius of the Buddha, that he could do that so well. So we're looking at impermanence and seeing the inherent instability of all phenomena, how nothing is, that we can really rely on anything. Nothing impermanent. can provide permanent happiness. So looking, interested, curious. How does the body affect the mind? How does the mind affect the body? What are the implications of this experience? What happens when we do this? And we take ourselves less and less seriously. So, this is the way that the fool reveals their foolishness. They let the chickens go, as we say in Thais. The extent to which someone believes in their mind and believes in their thoughts and believes in their perceptions. Yes. But perceptions and interpretations, they occur to us. They suddenly appear in the mind, just like a sneeze. We have this, sometimes we call it intuition, and sort of make it sound a bit special, but like gut instinct, what's that? Is that something that can be trusted? And in most cases, what we call gut instinct is just the integration of experience. So if you're going on a journey over ice in a car, you can trust a gut instinct of a rally driver or someone who's driven in such conditions many times, but maybe not the gut instinct of a new driver. As gut instinct is just accumulation and integration and digestion of information. But it can still be wrong, can also be wrong. So taking responsibility, we're looking, and then we see these other words that can lead us astray. So, he made me so angry. Something like that, this. So that is so demeaning, self-demeaning yourself, as abdicating all responsibility, And it's a very complex or philosophical idea, isn't it? That one human being can make another human being suffer. We're not talking about physical pain here. Of course, if you slap somebody's face or kick them, you can make them feel pain. But is it possible for one human being to inflict mental pain on another human being? And what the Buddha is saying is there has to be some participation from our side, or the person who's being abused or being mistreated or psychologically manipulated, whatever the case may be, that suffering is a co-production. There has to be some craving in the mind which combines with the condition, the trigger. So all the environment can provide and people can impose upon us as triggers. But whether or not we are triggered by those triggers is up to us and the extent to which we've trained our mind. So if you know how to abandon craving, don't allow craving to take over the mind, then there is the trigger. But in the absence of of craving, there's no suffering. So that doesn't mean that, as I mentioned this afternoon, talking about Dhamma and Vinaya, that doesn't mean it's okay for that person to act in that way. It might mean calling the police or, whatever, depending on how severe that person's actions are. But the internal practice, that's our responsibility. These two things have to go hand in hand. But here that's so liberating, isn't it? To know that if you train your mind, if you consistently apply the Buddha's teachings, nobody, nothing can make you suffer. If you suffer, you drop the ball, basically. I remember as a layperson reading some of these texts, samurai texts, Zen samurai literature, I was quite interested in. And this idea about these samurai masters is no samurai ever kills another samurai. All that happens is like one samurai loses his mindfulness, and thus that's why he dies. So the challenge and the goal is like perfect mindfulness, and then theoretically you could just keep fighting all day and all night. But this is application, you see. There's always something you can do. So say somebody, he made me so angry. Well, how did he do that? Well, it's what he shouldn't have said that. Oh, so you didn't want him to say that, or you didn't want him to... So that's an element, isn't it? That's a strand in it, that you're suffering because he did something, or she did something, or they said something that you didn't want them to do. Or you think that they shouldn't do. And that's the craving there. So when you see with wisdom, mindfulness and wisdom, why is somebody doing that? Well, because of various causes and conditions, because of their understanding, because of their perceptions, their thinking, because of the extent of their anger and aversion or jealousy or whatever. So all these causes and conditions manifest in this particular action, which is trigger for our suffering. But when we recognize the causal nature, and we're not creating a person, we're not creating either a person who is behaving badly or a person who is being treated badly, but we are able to experience things in terms of the stream of causes and conditions. So it sounds all very abstract and philosophical, but it's not. It's quite the opposite. It just becomes very natural to do that. You realize it's just before you were doing something, and now you realize you don't have to do that. So you see someone behaving badly and you think, my goodness, anger. When anger takes over somebody's mind, it can lead to that kind of behavior. My goodness. And I still got that kind of anger in myself as well. So I may not be able to do something about his or her anger, but I can do something about my anger. So that's different. Saying he's so angry, and it's and so we're framing this in terms of a self, a person who is angry. Now that may be the common way and the way everyone talks. It's a convention of language, but it's not a reflection of what's really going on. anger has occurred. Anger has swept aside that person's defenses. They are controlled by anger. And anger is doing what anger does. So returning to point I made before, that we have this choice that we can make, and mindfulness expands our choices. So this is another one of these favorite phrases: without mindfulness, few choices. With mindfulness, many choices. As without mindfulness, your mind just falls into the ruts and the habits of old. Even if we know in clearer moments that these are really bad habits, we just don't know how to get out of them. And when the triggers are there, the mind falls into the habit and then feels terrible afterwards. But the more mindful we are, the more we can create a gap between impact and reaction. And to the extent that we no longer call it reaction, it becomes response. So this evolution from reaction, knee-jerk reaction, to wise response. This is the life skill we learn through meditation and mindfulness practice. Keep bringing the mind back. Mind's drawn away and bring it back. It realizes that pull away and it doesn't follow that pull. Becomes more and more content and understands, feels, recognizes the pull towards greed, the pull towards anger, the pull towards delusion, and realize this is an invitation. You don't have to accept the invitation. Well, I'm glad that you all had the opportunity this evening to come and listen to the Dhamma and the trees, the big Buddha, and the nature. This is how the Savakas of old and how the monks and nuns learned the Dhamma. They didn't learn it through books and study, and how they learned it like this. And it's wonderful to be able to participate in this practice, because Buddhism, it's not it's not an institution. It's not to be found in buildings. It's to be found in the conduct, in the speech, in the mind of Buddhists. We're Buddhism. And as long as there is that intention to abandon the unwholesome, to develop the wholesome, to purify the mind, and Buddhism won't disappear from the world. I know some monks who I respect very much, they build this stupas and buildings that are going to last for 1,000 years. And my objection is, I like these. I like stupas, and I love to go and pay respect to stupas. So I'm not like a anti-stupa monk, but I have this memory of going to India and seeing a lot of ancient stupas with converted into mosques, Muslim shrines, and other religions taking these 1,000-year-old buildings and using them for different purposes. So building this most incredible stupas is highly meritorious, and I'm in no way critical of it. But it's not a guarantee that, therefore, Buddhism will be around in 1,000 years, because these buildings might just be taken over by other people. You see this in the West, in churches these days, people adapting churches into pubs even, and flats, and yeah, the church is a fine piece of architecture, but nobody wants to worship in them anymore. So the guarantee that Buddhism is going to be around in 1,000 years is what we're doing right here and now. That we're listening to the Dhamma, we're studying the Dhamma, we're applying the Dhamma. We're trying to realize the profound truth of the Dhamma. So this is good for us, and it's our duty and our privilege to play a very small part in maintaining and sustaining this wonderful tradition that goes back to the time of the Buddha. So I would like to share this teaching with you this evening.
Antamayang Dhammakatha Sadhu Karang Tathamase Sadhu 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 Anumodhami.
Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivade Suvakato Bhagavata Namo Dhammang Namasan Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅgho Saṅghang Namāmi.